The following podcast contains spoilers and adult language.
But wait, there's more. This episode not only slices and dices, it can cut through an entire ship. Call now to reserve your set of Ginsu nanofibers today. Operators are standing by.
You are bugs.
This is a message from the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Due to the recent crisis, we ask that you remain in your homes. Do not attempt to communicate or interact with the creatures, even if they are people you know.
Lock your doors. Bar your windows. Evil is coming. It's time for Aim for the Head, a horror apocalypse entertainment podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Diana and Steve.
Hi, and welcome back to Aim for the Head podcast. I'm Diana.
And I'm Steve.
And this week, we're covering episode 5 of the series Three Body Problem. Title of the episode is Judgment Day. And so I went first when we talked about our quick thoughts on the episode last week. So Steve, it's your turn to go first. So let's talk Judgment Day. What are your thoughts on episode 5 here?
Like I said before we started, when we were just chit-chatting before we started rolling, way back in like December when we decided to cover this series, I have been, ever since that moment, I have been waiting for right now just to get someone, in this case your initial reaction to watching episode 5 of Three Body Problem, because I think everyone who has seen it or who is watching it, when you get to episode 5, you ain't never seen nothing like episode 5.
No.
So I am so excited to hear you, just listen to you be like, oh my God. So, yeah, I mean, what can you say about this episode? It is certainly one of the most unforgettable, unbelievable episodes of television ever.
Yeah.
In terms of what they do. I loved it. It was gory and awful and disgusting and wonderful. And if you had a real hankering to see a lot more of Jonathan Pryce, too bad. Although his screen time at the end did double.
Yeah. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. And I also, I loved how this episode was really broken down into several very distinct story threads.
Mm-hmm.
Threads.
I see what you're saying there.
Okay, good. Come on, you have to humor me here. Yeah, there was I thought, yeah, this episode, it just, when I first watched it last year, I mean, this episode blew me away, where and I know you had the kind of this reaction too, where you're like, you weren't really sure what they were going to do with the fibers leading up to it, and I think everybody was the same way. And I mean, even the point where when Augie is like asking, like, how many people are on board the ship, and they're like, we don't know, and then she's like, is there anyone that's not a member of the crazy Santi cult that's going to be aboard? And they tell her, yeah, the pilot from the Canal Zone that comes in and like steers. Every ship has a Canal Zone person that steers the ship through those teeny tiny little channels, right? Yeah. And so that person is going to also be horribly killed, and nothing can do about it. And she's like, well, can't we warn them and get them off? And they're like, how do we do that? Yeah. I mean, as soon as they get up and leave, everyone else is going to know something's up, right? But even then, when they were doing that, I had no clue that what was going to happen was going to happen. And then once it starts happening, you're like, I can't believe this is happening. So this episode was just crazy, unbelievable, and just, again, like I said, gory and disgusting and wonderful. So I adore this episode. This is the episode of the series for me, based on what happened and how we got to see it happen and everything else. So I just, like I said, I have just been like patiently waiting to hear the words that are going to come out of your mouth right now. So please take it away.
Well, what's funny is before we started recording, we always talk a little bit about, this episode, and sort of get our juices flowing and talking about things so we can get, hang on, we'll save it for the show or whatever. And I think Steve had built this up so much since we announced it that I think he was expecting, once I watched the episode, because again, folks, I'm watching this week to week. I'm not binging it in advance. So he was expecting I was going to be like, oh my God, when I texted him.
Yeah.
And I assured him that I did have those feelings, but it was sitting with my mouth open on the couch, watching it and thinking in my head, oh my God. And I didn't actually have the brain energy to even text Steve right away about how crazy that episode was until probably a good 10 to 15 minutes after it was finished. So when it was finished, I sort of was sitting there and went, oh my God, I have to text Steve about this. And then I just texted him something funny as opposed to, oh my God. But make no mistake, I was blown away as well. And I actually, in the moment when, as soon as the guy, once you get the first slice and dice, the guy with the hose at the front of the ship, as soon as he slices, my first few thoughts that went through my head after the oh my God was all I could think was, because of the gore factor, I was like, oh, Steve probably loved this. Well, because, obviously we don't hide it, but Steve is the horror movie lover. I follow along and I enjoy a lot of the movies and the TV shows and stuff that Steve brings to the table when we talk about, since we got our start here on the podcast with zombies, etc. But it's like I'm not dragged to horror movies. It's just never been my forte. So as soon as I saw this really awesome, so well executed gore factor, I was like, oh, Steve loved the hell out of this. Absolutely, without question. So, I had a lot of enjoyment in that factor where I was like, without question, Steve loved this. And with each single person, as each person got sliced, I was like, oh God. It just the tension, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's just a little click, higher. And then I just, it's so crazy.
Well, and then when after when we see all the people are killed, and then the ship kind of lists to the right and runs into the shore, and then you see the layers come an accordions apart and stuff, and you're like, oh yeah. I mean, it's just it's unbelievable. And I should point out, the reason why I was expecting some massive reaction is that, if you recall, Diana, last week in episode 4. When the reveal happened that Wang Ji was the founder at the party, I got this text holy crap from you. And so I was just like, oh my God, the pump is primed. She's going to her fingers are going to be bleeding. She's going to be typing so hard into her phone. I'm like, holy shit. And then nothing. So I have to say, I was a little disappointed. Okay.
I know. And mentally it was just because it was so astounding. I just couldn't form regular cogent thoughts in my head. So, if you think about it, here's this show that has this really amazing scientific premise. I mean, it's a great science fiction show that is so rooted in real science. I mean, there's obviously things that couldn't happen, but could they? We don't know. But there's such a basis and love of science on that bottom layer. Then there's some great drama added on. It's got some science fiction, so there's sort of futuristic elements and things like that. All these things to sort of tickle our fancies for storylines and things to draw you in. And for that story to then execute a scene that even like the hardest hardcore like horror fan would have to say, you've never seen anything like that before. You've never seen anything put out that way. The only thing I would say that even comes close to that, and it's very, very in like a far distant thing, is the Walking Dead episode where Rick and Michonne drove the cars down the highway and they had the one single like wire in the middle, and they cut through all of the, but the difference there was you saw them setting it up. It was a known quantity. You're like, oh my God, I think I know what they're going to do. And then they start driving and you have the anticipation of, oh, they're going to cut through this whole herd. And you know what I mean? Like, and there's a satisfaction factor of, oh my God, they're slicing this entire herd in half. Right. And there was that, but I think it's sort of the nuts and bolts of it were kind of similar. But the fact that, like you were saying, we were talking before we started recording, you knew the nanofibers were going to be used, but you're not really sure how until the first guy sliced in multiple places. So until that happened, you really didn't have an idea of how it was going to be employed. And the fact that you couldn't see it is a level of like fear factor that just didn't exist with like the Walking Dead or like, you know, anything else where there was some sort of, you know, multiple slicings or some sort of mechanical slicing or whatever. You sort of could see it starting. Like the fact that the scene, he's like, why isn't it working? And she's just staring straight ahead and she's like, oh, it's working.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that along the fact you couldn't see it happening until it was happening. And the fact that it just was indiscriminate. You couldn't stop it. The whole point was that it would make such a clean slice that it didn't matter the weight, the size, you know, it cut through a diamond, for crying out loud. So it's gonna cut through an entire ship without stopping. If they had set up like some kind of other like a laser beam or something like that, you know, like, you know, something crude, like even just like a high tension wire or a piano wire or something like that, something that would create resistance. There was nothing involved in this nanofiber that was going to create any kind of resistance. It was going to be a clean cut all the way through, no matter how heavy duty the steel is that's in the center with, like, you know, the engine and the engine part.
Right. Yeah. It's going to cut through everything.
It's going to slice it. Everything that it encounters is going to go through it like butter. So, you know, once the inevitability of the ship going through there is no stopping it. It's unless somebody warned the guy in the front of the, you know, actually, I think the captain guy is probably either at the top or somewhere in the back of the ship. Unless there's some type of warning for him to throw on the brakes, there was no stopping what was going to be happening. It was just this eventual march through the ship until it made it all the way to the end. And then it just, like you said, just sort of like slid off to the shore and just like melted into nothing, you know, slices and dices, and then it all just lit on flames. And I think like the amount of elements that it took to put this episode together, like I was saying, with all the science fiction, and then this actual horror element, it was just so well stitched together. It's just amazing how great it was. I was not bored at any moment of this episode. The tension was nice and tight. It was, you know, the funny moments were funny. The smart moments were smart. I had no idea what was going to happen, like 95% of the time, which is great that they've sort of, you know, created this whole world that we just can't predict what's going to happen in the next episode. So I love that. I love that we're in this immersive fully realized sort of world that is unpredictable and so engaging and amazing and entertaining to watch. So I'm so excited for episode 6. I can't wait. So let's enough of us talking in sort of broad terms about the whole episode and things that we liked. Let's get into more of our nitty-gritty. Let's talk first the episode description, and then we'll get into our writers and director for the episode. So, Steve, that is all your business. So, hop to it.
All right. Again, the episode is Three Body Problem Season 1, Episode 5, and the title is Judgment Day. And yes, it has nothing to do with the nuclear war from Terminator 2. And the description that we have is as follows. As threat levels rise, a secret mission to retrieve enemy intel ventures into dangerous territory. Panama? Anyway, an ominous message reaches Earth. And that is your episode description. And yes, those things kind of happen. So good job.
Yes. A few more things happened in between those two sentences, but in a very, very broad and general sense, that was the episode, I suppose.
Well, I just imagine if you were trying to write the description and you wanted to give a little more detail, and you said, Augie and Raj cheese grate or shred a large, vessel, killing everyone on board. People would read that and be like, "What?
How did they accomplish that?"
Yeah, exactly. What?
How was that even possible?
Right. All right. So moving on, for our writers and our director, the director this week, we'll start with the director first because it's the same director as last week, which is this gal named Minky Spiro. And as I said last week, Minky Spiro has a lot of creds. She directed shows like Barry, Lodge 49, Better Call Saul, Jessica Jones. So, again, tons of TV credit. And I thought she, kicked ass in this episode because, like you said, the funny stuff's funny, the serious stuff's serious, the gross stuff is gross. It was all really a great episode. So,
yes,
well done again on her part. And I think she directs one more episode of the three that are left. So I think we will see her again. And our writers this time, we are back to the two of the three show creators and showrunners, in that we have David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, which, of course, you remember and recognize from that weird dice game show that you watch. That everyone knows, the Game of the Thorns. And they also, like David Benioff, he also wrote for Gemini Man, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and Brothers. And D.B. Weiss wrote for a show called Metal Lords. And he also, I think this is where they met, was either met on Game of Thrones or they met on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, because they both wrote for those shows during their airing. So, they're series creators and the showrunners. And I believe next week's episode is written by the third guy of the three that created this show, Benjamin Wong, I think his name is. Great. Something like that. Yeah. So the series creators, the showrunners, getting much super involved now as we're about halfway through the story. So
nice.
So that is your writers and your director.
All right. So our cold open scene is the scene with Wade recruiting Raj to his. And my big takeaway was I find it hard to believe in a show where everybody so far has had a purpose. I was curious how Raj would lead into this. And the fact that we knew he was military, I'm not sure I knew he was Navy until it became clear in this episode he's Navy. It may have been mentioned previously and I just missed it, but I knew he was military. That's what he was doing. That was his vocation. So this whole time I'm like, he's got to figure in somehow. Like at some point he needs to be part of this story. Like he's got a part to play in this story, and I just didn't know what it was yet. So it was interesting to see him become a part of the fold. And two big observations. One, in that moment when Wade is, clearly is actively recruiting him, and they have the little funny moment where it's like, a normal person would ask to see ID, and but if you did, I'd equate you with the same sackless people that already work for the Navy, whatever. And he's, he's literally like belittling him, but also trying to recruit him at the same time.
I think he already recruited him, and Raj just didn't know it yet.
Yeah, it was sort of like, and then when he's like, some people would ask for an ID and and then insults him, and then he's like, "Can I see your ID, sir?"
May I please see your ID? Yes.
But what's great is that up until this point, Raj has been very, professional, and almost he's insulted pretty much this whole time, but he's doing his best to not be like he's giving it away. He's not saying anything insulting. He's more or less doing it in his tone. He's being he's showing his irritation with Wade, and et cetera, et cetera. But in the moment when Wade flashes his ID, there's a change in Raj that is so perceptible. And my point was, I wanted to know, is it finding out that Wade is Wade, so either his name means something or who he works for means something, because one of those two things, or both of those things, changed something in Raj and made him like, because he wasn't being forthcoming about like details about the ship and and as soon as he read it, he just started to like diarrhea of the mouth talk about the ship and whatever. And there's a change on his face. He's internally reacting, but he's reacting to whatever it is that it said on that ID that Wade flashed for him. And I think that that's interesting. I don't know if we'll ever know like what company or agency or whatever that Wade works for. I don't know if we will, and I don't think it's important. I think him just flashing that badge or that ID to Raj and having Raj have that reaction, like that's enough for me. That's all I need to see, because it's some super secret government agency or some black ops, like, military-esque, like blah, blah, blah. I don't know. And I don't have to know. I just had everything that was on Raj's face was everything I needed to know in that moment. I also enjoyed, and it's from a much later scene, but it is regarding the whole inclusion of Raj. There's a scene with Augie, and it's when she's talking to Clarence before they head out to Panama. And she's in the car with Clarence, and she says, "Don't you think it's weird that Wade hired Jin's boyfriend to lead this mission?" And Clarence's response was, "I think everything that Wade does is weird."
Right? Oh yeah, yeah.
I think everything that man does is weird, and he just like fluffs it off or whatever. But I like that Augie, like we've mentioned this before, that with these folks that, they're scientists, they probe, they ask questions, they share results with each other because they're so used to like peer review, etc. And I'm just like, in that moment, Augie was just so honest about how, don't you think it's weird? Because everybody else is like, don't you think it's strange that Jin's boyfriend was the one who was asked? Out of everybody in the Navy, we're asking this guy. And I'm like, again, it's got to lead to like, what is Raj's final purpose? Is he connected in some, is there some extra connection that we don't have yet? And I don't know what that is, but I appreciated that Augie came right out there and said it again. And I'm hoping that by her asking that question, maybe in like the next episode or two, it'll be like all these other things where I've asked the question or made the statement where I'm like, oh, clearly Vera is Mike Evans' daughter and blah, blah, blah. And that clearly becomes truth in this episode. But it's like, I want that to be like the thing that goes out there. I would like to find out the extent of Raj's like knowledge, his connection. I hope that comes through soon. But yeah, that cold open scene where it's just Wade doing the recruiting, I thought that was fantastic and such a great continuation of Wade being the sort of mysterious but hilarious guy. I just think it was great. How about you? What did you think of that opener?
Oh yeah, it was a fun scene. Just when Raj is like, it stops him right at the beginning, and he's like, he says something like, you're recruiting for MI6, and I don't want to go there, and he's like, I don't work for MI6.
Yeah, nope.
So yeah, it's right away, and just the way Wade is like telling him he like talked to all of his instructors at the academy and every superior officer he had and every see you next Tuesday that's known him in the Navy basically. Yeah. And just first of all, you totally believe that he did, and second of all, wow, what authority that his ID has, that he can get access to all of those people instantly and get that kind of, personal information on a individual. I mean, if that didn't tell you that, oh my God, whatever organization he works for, they are super high up. Right. And they can, there's nothing classified that he can't look at. Right. So,
right.
So yeah, and again, the way that, the actor is performing, that and playing that character he's just, fun. Right.
Yeah.
Cause he has a couple scenes like that. He has that scene. He has the scene when he goes and picks up, Jin at like the safe house and drives her back into the city, and that exchange is very funny. And then there's a scene when they're getting ready in the canal, and Wade goes up to Augie, and he's like, he talks to Raj, and Raj is like, we're good, everything's on schedule and everything. And so then he walks down from there up to Augie, who's working on something, and he's like, he goes there and he's like, I don't trust him. Double check his work. And then they have this weird exchange and she's, of course, kind of upset because she knows what's going to happen on the ship and is kind of having second thoughts and everything. So he then turns around and leaves her when he finishes talking to her, and he goes back up to Raj and he goes, I don't really think she's doing a good job. Triple check her work.
Yeah. Yeah, so, sort of like, working them both against the middle there.
Exactly. I mean? Right.
Yeah.
Right. They're both watching each other. Right. And so, it was wonderful. So, and a real interesting opening scene, because again, you're like, oh, this is Jen's boyfriend. Why is he being recruited?
Why is he involved in any way?
Yeah. Right. It's like, you think they could have found anyone to do that was just as qualified as that guy, but again, we'll have to see if it's explained or what explanation we get. So
yeah, absolutely. Once we get back from the credit sequence, the first scene we get is what a great it's a great progression of scenes. It's about 3 scenes total, 2 to 3 scenes total with Clarence and Wenji. And those are such great moments because they're very like well matched in terms of like toe to toe. And sometimes Wenji has the upper hand and sometimes Clarence does, and just like seeing that balance. But you and I both, we've got some great like notes that we took about like that first opening scene, and it's basically like Wing-Ji is like, she's given it all up. She's talking about all of her reasons and all of her motivations, and he's backtracking on like, you know, hey, the aliens contacted you and in whatever, and she's like, yeah, they did. And the again, another show where it's like they're answering questions as opposed to being like, you know, oh,
mysterious.
Well, be mysterious until the finale. You know what I mean? That's what we're used to with TV shows. It's like this large amount of information is just so I enjoy it. It's nice for a show to have like there is still mystery, but they're telling you so much information in the meantime. You're like, it's that much more palpable because it's, you know, I know all of this information, but I still have no idea what's going to happen.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is that the show explains why she's explaining, right?
Yeah.
In that he goes out and he, you know, has a moment where he goes and sees Wade and is kind of like giving him a status report or to confer with him. And of course, Wade's obviously watching the video feed that they're rolling. And, you know, he's Clarence is like, you know, the reason why she's telling us everything is that she firmly believes that she's no longer important to the Santee. And therefore, anything she knows is irrelevant. So, of course, she can answer questions. And she's not withholding anything. She's being truthful and so on. Because you would think, why would you if you were in that position? If, you know, you had all of this info and it's, you know, for this thing, you'd be like, no, go screw yourself. I'm not going to talk. And she's just like, sure. What do you want to know? Because, again, in her mind, it's like, look, if I'm sitting here in this room being interrogated by you, it's and what did you say? You wrote it down. It's like, because they wanted it to happen or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So she is, you know, firmly in the camp of, you know, if everything that happens, they are controlling. And so if they think that, you know, I'm not a threat, that if you interrogate me, I will answer any question you want. It doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. There's some really great lines in that opening scene opening scene. And, you know, like I said, Clarence and Wing-Ji, like toe to toe, comment to comment. They're just like, they're not even really sort of one-upping each other. They're also sort of probing each other and figuring each other out, you know? And
so you're the good cop.
And he's like, sometimes.
Yeah. Where's the bad cop? And he like taps the camera.
Watching.
And then later on, when he says something kind of hurtful about Vera, you know, then she goes, maybe you're not the good cop after all. And she gives as good as she gets. I mean, they both do. Like you said, they both are not afraid to like draw a little blood with some of their comments, you know.
Yes.
Like there's one bit where, you know, he inquires like maybe Mike Evans, you know, talk to Vera, you know, at some point and explain to her, you know, that he's her dad. And Wen-Ji is like, you know, the first time he ever saw her, she was in her coffin. Yeah. And Clarence is like, man, and I thought I was a shit dad. And she goes, you probably are.
And she just like does it without like total straight face, you know?
Yeah,
what I mean?
Right.
He doesn't show any emotion, but to be fair, neither does he. Like they are very well matched in that sense. They don't, you know, they keep like jabbing, but the other one isn't giving away anything. Like in terms of emotion, they're not releasing their emotions in that moment. It's just fantastic. I wrote down like my quote that I put down was that when he asked, you know, why would you agree or why would you be happy that the Santee are coming or whatever. Yeah,
he says like, you know, they told you not to respond, you know, yet you did anyway. Why?
Right. Yeah, and she says because our civilization is no longer capable of solving its own problems. And I'm not going to lie, like I know we try really hard not to bring current politics into anything that we talk about on the podcast because you know, everybody's got a different feeling about different things and we don't want to offend anyone for sure. But it really feels a little bit like that right now, where it's just sort of like there's like the threads of so many things are just slowly falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just, this isn't just an American thing, but you see governments and politics and things like that in other large industrial nations and stuff like that. There's some things, there's like some pulling at the threads and stuff like that. So it's interesting. I just, that line just really hit me strongly these days. I'm not sure if like 6 months ago I would have felt the same way that I do right now about that line. So yeah. And I did enjoy like we were saying, the confirmation of like questions I had in previous episodes. And I said, well, obviously he's got to be her father, right? And then when he says, we're right in assuming he's Vera's father, and I was like, yes, that is correct.
Answered, asked and answered, yes.
But I love Wang-Ji's response, and she says, only in the biological sense.
Right.
And I was like, good. So because in the last episode I talked about like, just because Vera was raised as Wang-Ji's daughter, it didn't necessarily mean that she was her biological daughter. There was the sense on the ship that there were some abandoned children and some orphans, that there was a sense with some things. So the fact that, Vera was raised by Wang-Ji didn't necessarily mean that was her biological daughter. So just because she was having a relationship with Mike didn't mean that that Vera was his daughter. But there's, to me, I felt like there was a high probability of it, and it was confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes me happy. Not gonna lie.
Well, and then they confirm something that I had raised, and to be honest, I had forgotten this little nugget about the story. And so when I was watching, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Where whenever like Jack would put on Vera's helmet at the beginning, the sword lady would show up and say, you're not invited, and cut his head off. And then, when Augie put the helmet on in Jack's room, the sword lady showed up and said, you're not invited, and cuts her head off. And yet when Jin put on the helmet that is in Vera's room, right, that we are led to believe was Vera's, she's just playing, and that never happens, and it's like, well, how is that, and we were kind of like, well, they're both Asian, so maybe it like was set that way or something, whatever, we didn't know. And we come to find out in this episode that helmet was always meant for Jin, and so Vera was not playing the game. And that also answers another question too, which is how could Wen-Ji like let her daughter, play in this thing and then get so upset about it and not talk to her about it and tell her things gonna be okay? Because we were under the assumption that she'd played the game and was so distressed by what she had found out that was contributed to her killing herself. Right. And you'd be like, how could you do that, right? Because she doesn't seem to be that cold-blooded towards like people she likes, right? So that question was answered too, and I thought that was really, again, like you said, it's like, oh wow, they're actually like going through like the issues that we might have and saying this is the answer. So that was cool.
I like the quote that you included too, from that scene with Wang-Ji and Clarence. So
it's when it's when he's talking about so E.T. phoned home in 1977, you got an answer and they told you not to respond, and now you did anyway, and so now they're on their way and they're going to wipe us out. And she's like, why do you say that? And he goes, usually when people with more advanced technology encounter people with more primitive technology, it doesn't work out well for the primitives.
Yeah. I just think that says a lot. You know what I mean? It says a lot about, like who considers who the primitives, and like at the end of the episode, we get a little bit more of like, in 400 years, they would be the primitives and we would be the one who's at. So it's like, it says a lot about the makeup of the episode itself too, which I thought was great.
Well, and one of the things that comes up in this conversation, and it actually comes up again when Jin and Wade put on the helmets to kind of get the Sophon story info, is Clarence is kind of like asking her some nuts and bolts thing. He's like, look, it takes 4 light years for a radio signal to travel from our planet to their planet. So it takes 4 years to send it, and then 4 years after the reply is sent to get back. But yet Mike Evans has been living in this ship, and it's almost like he's communicating, in faster than light communication that's much more instantaneous. And he's like, that's impossible. How can he be doing that? And when G is like, her response is, it's impossible for us.
Right.
And then later on, when the Santi woman is explaining how they created a computer that's like the size of like a neutron or an electron, and Jin's like, that's impossible. No one can make a computer that's small. And this time, the Santi woman goes, impossible for you. Right. So I liked how that kind of showing just how far advanced they are to us right now, just light years beyond what we even think is possible, so.
Yeah. It's funny because I did have a thought about that with him. Like, he's having like real time conversations with them, but then they bring up the whole light years thing and stuff like that. And it was either in like the last episode or the episode before. And I was like, and I had that thought in my head where I was like, well, if they're that far away, and like, how is he talking to them in real time? Like,
exactly.
So it's explained, but not explained. And I think that's really interesting in a science fiction sense, because, the whole point is like things that are rooted in science, but are beyond, like they're futuristic. They're things that we couldn't conceive of. And these are actual scientists, and they are things that they're like, that's not possible. And they're like, to you. And I'm like, that's the best kind of science fiction, is that they're saying it's scientifically possible to a scientist who is telling them it's impossible. I just think it's such a great makeup of the storyline.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. We live in what I like to call an Einsteinian universe. And that his theory of relativity and everything, pretty much most of the science community believes is correct. And if it is, you can't go faster than light. And yet clearly this species has developed technology that allows you to send information faster than light. You know what I mean? So again, the whole way that our science thinks the universe works is like totally destroyed by what they can do. That shows you how far advanced they are over us. It would be the equivalent of like showing up back in like the 1500s in America and meeting the Native Americans, but like having cell phones and computers and stuff.
Right.
I mean, they would just think it's witchcraft. They'd have no concept. So
absolutely. Yeah. You and I both include, there's a really great scene, fantastic scene with Clarence and Augie, but there's a quick scene before that of on the ship, and it's basically Mike is he's trying to contact them again, and there's no answer, but he ends up having this really great, right after it's fruitless, they're not answering, and it's this great conversation with what we would probably have called the video game monitor guy.
Yes.
Who we find out his name is Felix. Before he dies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So he has this nice conversation with Felix, where Felix makes a good point, where he's like, listen, people on the boat are worried. They have family members. They have, friends and family that obviously must have been a part of that raid that had happened in the last episode when Wing-Ji was taken. And they believe, but they're having a hard time because they have such faith in, I'm using the air quotes, the Lord. And, would the Lord have allowed something like that to happen? And they've always said no, because of, they would be protected, and they've said all these things that, you know, the Lord would protect us and wouldn't allow something like that. And here these bad things happen. I mean, people died there at that raid. And, you know, Mike puts Felix's mind and his heart at ease. And he basically says to him, do you think they would have allowed it to happen if they did not want it to happen?
Right. Yeah.
And it was great because, like, here are these people putting faith in an alien species to come, but there's so much in the fabric of what they're saying and in the wording of how they're putting things and how they're putting, you know, their situations like together. It has such religious connotation, so much. And, you know, all of this faith and obviously the easy stuff where they're using things like the Lord and whatever. But, you know, these scenes where they're saying, you know, have faith, it's exactly like a scene you would hear between, like, say, a priest and a parishioner talking about, you know, why would God make my husband suffer before he died, you know, like and how a priest would respond to that, you know, where there's a meaning and a purpose and all things.
The grand plan, right?
Right, absolutely. And I just think it's interesting because it's the religious conversation, the religious explanation, but it's not religion. You know, they're asking these folks to have faith and to believe and to, you know, believe that these things happened because they were supposed to happen a certain way. And what's crazy is in that moment, I'm not religious and I'm very much a skeptic whenever any of that conversation happens. I looked at it with that same lens of skepticism, and I looked at Mike, and he already knows that he's not in conversation with the Lord. So he's lying to Felix.
The one thing he told the Santi he tries not to do.
You know, and he's lying again, and he's you know, here's this moment where he's telling Felix to have faith, and it's like, and Felix should not have faith right now because the facts are that Mike screwed it up. You know, he said the wrong thing and scared the Santi away. And he's not in regular conversation with them anymore, but he's putting on this face like he is. And it's like, I look at that and I just think of, you know, people who say, you know, in Christianity or whatever, you know, Western religion, you know, they say, you know, the God talked to me or had this, you know, whatever. And I looked at that. I look at all of that stuff with skepticism, and I apply that sort of same thing with someone not lying. I would not say, like, you know, priests and things like that lie, but I feel like there's a little bit of a, you know, a lubrication of the truth, as it were.
Well, it's a leap
to
of
sort
faith.
Of have it, to help people keep faith in that which they you know, revere, etc. So I think it's very, very interesting, this whole like framing it as a religion, and it's great because a lot of people would say that religion is almost like the opposite of science. You know, like science is proof, and, you know, religion is faith. So it's like you look at those two things and it's hard for them to coexist. And so I think it's interesting that this is a science story that is told in the language of religion with faith, etc. So it's just an interesting point.
Yeah, it is. And I would like to point out that, you know, Felix, I get the sense that, you know, he's losing his faith when he has that conversation.
Of course, yeah.
And, you know, ultimately at the end, when he lost his faith, he went to pieces.
He did.
Anywho,
you were dying.
I have just been coming up with shredding puns all day, people. I have been waiting for this episode for like 3 months now. Okay. But all seriousness though, the scene at the end when Wade goes in and talks to Wenji and tells her about what happened on the boat, and he leaves her the little recorder and everything. If you remember in that, he starts out, and you have a great line that I won't say. I don't want to ruin it for you. I want you to talk about when we get there. But she's talking about what she knows about the Santi, and then halfway through the conversation, she changes it into what she thinks or what she hopes. And his Wade is like, see, now you're changing from knowledge to belief. That's dangerous. And again, very much where she starts out, and she's very analytical and scientific about it, what the Santi are going to do and what their their whole approach. And then it kind of veers into this almost religious belief that they're going to save us because they're better than we are and all that stuff. So that you're right. It's very prevalent in this episode with confusing or mixing knowledge with hope. And like you said, religion and science don't tend to coexist too well together.
Correct. So speaking of science, before we get into some of there's lots of great science in this episode, but probably the best is, they have this great scene where Wade and Clarence, like, really quickly, they try and figure out, like, well, what are we going to do? We've got they need to come up with a plan to get copies of all the copies of the conversations that Mike has had with the aliens, with the Santi. And they know that he's never going to give that up. He's gonna, if they try to capture him, he's going to take it with them. And he must have, like, downloaded it or has it someplace secure so that you can always reference it, right? Because he's also, I wouldn't really call Mike a scientist, but he's sort of like, he had a science background and at least a love of nature, like, in the beginning. So, he's more of from that frame of mind where you would want to prove something. And the best way to prove it is to have the evidence. And his best way to have the evidence is to have all those conversations and things recorded and saved on a drive somewhere. So they realize that in order to understand more and to be able to be prepared for the Santi, they need to get those conversations. And they need to put together a plan. And then they talk through, like, let's try this to get the stuff on the boat. And they go through all these different scenarios, and nothing seems like that won't work, that won't work, that won't work, that won't work. And Clarence is like, I think I have an idea. I think I might have something.
Wade is like, you're giving me all these crappy ideas. And he's like, tell me something good. And he's like, well, the Judgment Day did reserve a slot to go through the Panama Canal in, like, a week. And you can tell, like, he has something more that he is going to tell Wade about it, but
which we're not there in the room for, no.
Right, to like really, like, help save the surprise of the slicing and dicing scene. We do not get it, but yeah, they like run through a bunch of stuff, like they storm the boat with special forces, and they, again, probably destroy it before they could find it. They talk about, like, a missile strike, but then they might, like, destroy the thing that they want to get, and so, like, every like conventional way to get onto that ship and get, look for it, they're pretty much like, look, it's going to take too long, or it'll be too damaging that we probably won't get the hard drive or whatever it is that they are recording all of this data on. And so then finally, Clarence thinks outside the box a little.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, he comes up with this plot of the nanofibers. But of course, in order to use the nanofibers, they have to make nanofibers, which means he has to go recruit Augie to join their army. And so if we're keeping score at home, that means that now 3 of our main characters are now working for Wade.
Right. They were originally called the Oxford Five, and was Wang Ji recruiting them, or is Wade recruiting them? Let's be honest. Is it a little bit of both? So because of Clarence's crazy idea, we get this great scene with Clarence bringing Augie to her old lab. And it's such a great scene because she's basically like, this isn't going to work. the cops out there aren't going to help. And, she's very like, nothing's going to work. And you don't understand. And they get there and she has, she's got this point, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. She's the one, as she puts it, she's the one who has a bomb inside her head, basically. And Clarence is like, I know, like, I get it. But he's basically saying, this is our only shot at doing this.
Yeah, he says that this is our only shot, and he also, and it might not have been with Augie, but it might have been with Wen-Ji. He brings up the idea that it seems like the shepherd is no longer protecting the flock.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
the raid worked, and they, that's why Wen-Ji got captured. If they were still looking out for the devoted followers, they never would have even known the meeting was going to take place. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So he at least has a little bit of, and I'm going to use the word faith, that it's going to work, because
exactly.
he's kind of made the jump that, you know what, I don't think the Santi are like paying a lot of attention right now to us for some reason that he does not know.
Right.
Which of course is the falling out that, Mike Evans had when he, said the wrong thing. Thank you so much, Mike Evans. He kind of basically begs her to do it, saying, look, the only way this is going to work is if you help. We need your nanofibers. And I love it because she's like, well, what do you want them for? And he's like, I can't tell you that.
Which is great, because then we don't know what he needs them for either. So,
it is. But at the same time, he should have said, if I tell you what I want them for, you will never give them to me.
Right. Or you never believe me.
Right. Exactly.
A little bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they get this great scene. She's visibly upset. She's shaken. She's totally expecting, because we had that scene before. And clearly that's why they had that scene a couple of episodes back, is to show that all she had to do was click a couple of things on her computer
and
the countdown started again, and she had to shut it off. So that's exactly what we are all expecting to see. And it doesn't happen. And she is so relieved and excited that it didn't happen that she's in tears, and she hugs Clarence.
She hugs him. Yeah.
I know, it's this great moment. And she's like, why didn't it happen? And he's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's when he says, I don't know, but I have a feeling they're not as
the shepherd's not
protecting the flock anymore, as when he says that. And it's this great moment. Their scene on the whole was just amazing, because she's like, nothing's going to help. She says the thing about the cops are outside, they're not going to help, and da-da-da. And she's like, and he's like, do you want to smoke? And she's like, you can't in here. And he's like, oh no, will I get in trouble? Like, he's very sarcastic about it. And she's like, that's not going to help either. So she's literally like logging into her computer, and the whole time he's literally like he's
rolling a cigarette.
And he's doing that. And then she's like, oh, I really could use a drink. And he pulls out a hip flask and puts it right on the table. And she's like, oh, old school. And then she opens it, she takes a sniff, and she's like, oh, what is this? And he says whiskey. And she takes a sip, and she's like, oh, and he's like, well, I can't afford the good stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And you think she's going to be like, she's going to poo-poo it. And she takes it, and she very likely drains the whole bottle into her mouth.
Oh,
and
she drinks a lot, yeah.
Yeah, she either drinks a lot of it or she drinks all of it. And he's just like, he stops what he's doing and watches, because he can't believe it. And she's just like, she used that, it got her courage, and then she turned her computer on, et cetera, and ended up not having the countdown, but she doesn't know that. She's sort of getting herself ready for that terrible moment. It is just a great moment, because like I said, we're expecting the countdown. We think it's going to happen. And so when it doesn't, we have the same sort of release that Augie does. We're just as excited. We're like, great, she's not going to die. I like that character.
Well, and there's been a lot of death on this show already in terms of main characters. So it's like, please don't kill more.
Right. I did have a moment of like morbid curiosity where I wanted to see what happens when the
counter hits zero.
The countdown runs out, because we have no confirmation that happened with the people we've seen who died. We just know they tried to end it themselves, like end the the countdown themselves. So we don't know that it made it to 0. We just know through like Tatiana's story, you won't like what happens when it goes to 0. Okay, but that's just a story. We don't know what it is. So there was like, there's sort of a little morbid curiosity in my head. I'm like, I don't want Augie to die, but I also kind of want to
see what happens when it hits.
Yeah. Sorry. And I'm glad she's here. I am very glad that she's here. Plus, her surviving means we got the best gore sequence known to man. So, you know.
You couldn't do it without her. So, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. I called her Angie in my notes.
I was really waiting for you to explain who Angie is when she goes back to work, because I'm like, I'm not sure who that is.
Angie yet. I don't know who that is. Augie. I think that was definitely a autocorrect thing there.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can have faith in that if you want.
There's in between there's 2 really great Augie scenes. There's her getting the nanofibers like up and running again, and then the getting ready to leave for the Panama Canal, etc. And there's this really great cute little scene that I included a note from that I loved, and it's just Saul and Will at the shoreline. It's Will by himself, and Saul shows up, and he's got it's Jack's lawyer, and he's
solicitor.
It's telling him about his inheritance from Jack's estate, and that Will gets half of his estate. It's like 20 million pounds. It's crazy, and Will's it's so great because he's like talking about it, and Will's like, sorry, I'm really high right now.
I'm super high right now. Yeah. Great. Well, you get the sense that he's been sitting there, and it's like a typical English vacation day at the beach where it's like overcast and probably like 60. So he's like in like a coat and pants and a hat and is sitting on this chair, and he's like clearly been smoking weed all day.
Oh yeah,
right,
absolutely.
And so when they finally show up, and the guy, what is the word he uses? Like, it's not endowment, but it's like a legal term for what when you inherit something. And Will's like laughing. He's like, "Is that a real word?" So and then eventually he's like, "I'm really sorry. I'm super high."
Yeah, it was great. It's great. And so he explains the whole thing. And you can see that there's a moment where like the solicitor is like waiting for Will to be like, hey, hand me the papers and the pen. And Saul, who is not high, is like, he takes them and he's like, we'll sign these and make sure they're taken care of, and I'll get them to you. Don't worry. Like, he's the adult in that moment.
Exactly. Which is rare for Saul in this show, right?
Exactly. Yeah. He's usually the one who's stoned and like not able to function. So it was a nice little trade-off. So the solicitor leaves, and they have this really great moment where Saul is telling him, this is great. You've got all this money. You can, get the most expensive treatments and da-da-da-da. Like you could try a bunch of different things, which he's not wrong. Money can give you access to lots of stuff that like regular slobs don't get,
And he says like, this is what Jack would have wanted to spend the money on.
Exactly. And that's, if Jack were alive, he would have been like, okay, we're going to go to like 10 different countries and get the most state of the art, whatever it is.
Have all the experts look at you and examine you and tell you what they think and, all that. Yeah. And Will's like,
no thanks. Yeah. He rejects the whole thing. And I totally get it. He's like, with the little time that he has left, he doesn't want to be like jetting all over the place and getting poked and prodded by all these different doctors. He just wants to, as he puts it, he's like, I just want to sit and look at the sky, which is pretty crazy considering he does that at the end of the episode and the sky is, let's say, problematic.
I would say yes. Very problematic. Yeah. So, he literally is like, look, I don't know how much time I have left, but I've got a few good weeks before it's going to get really bad, and I just want to enjoy them.
Yeah.
And Saul's like, yeah, I could get on board with that.
Yeah, it's I love Saul in that moment where he doesn't push it. He doesn't press. He's like, this is Will's, this is what he wants to do. And that's the difference in the friends of, Saul and Jack. Like, Jack wouldn't have taken no for an answer. He would have, had a doctor come from Austria and take care of him here in England then. So he doesn't have to fly all over the place. You know what I mean? Like, that's what Jack, whereas Saul is like, I get it, man. Then we're going to do what you want to do. And he's like, man, I'm really hungry. And Saul's like, this is, and he's like, this is great Cornish pasty place. Do you want to go there? And Saul's like, I love a Cornish pasty. I love Cornish pasties. And Will's like, we could buy 5 million if you want. Because he's got all this money now. I just thought it was a really sweet little scene. And I love the way it ended there. It was a great moment.
And also when after the lawyer leaves, the very first thing that Will says to Saul is, do you want it?
The money. He doesn't even want it. Yeah.
Right. Well, because, again, the irony can't be lost on people, right? Here, this guy finally has, basically more money than he could ever spend. And, he's literally dying.
Yeah.
Right. And not only that, but his best friend died. That was the reason he got the money in the first place. So, I mean, he's just like, I don't want it. I don't want it at all. Give it to someone that could actually enjoy it, to its full extent. Yeah. But it is. It's a very sweet little scene. And we have to see because out of the scientists, out of the Oxford 5, those are the two that have been like the least used so far.
Right. So before we started recording, I made a comment about how I really hope that we find out soon. Like, I'm convinced that Will and Saul, like the fact that they're the Oxford 5, air quotes, has got to mean something more than just they all kind of worked together. As you were saying, like, all these people working for Wade now, et cetera. So it's like, you almost feel like we're just waiting for the next phase will include like where Saul fits in the spectrum and where does Will fit in this spectrum as well. So I really hope that happens, sooner rather than later, because, Will's time is of the essence now. So it's not like they can sort of linger and be like, hey, he's got a great scientific mind. Well, we'll get to him. No,
you
should check with him now.
Yeah. Overalls.
Yeah, exactly. So there's so many things to talk about in Panama. But there's a setup day, and after they're doing like, there's a scene where they show them getting started with like setup. They have a certain amount of hours to get set. And then there's a scene with Augie and Raj where they're having dinner at like a local restaurant. And then there's the big, long, drawn out Judgment Day for the Judgment Day, as it were. And you included, there's a great moment in that scene where Augie and Raj are having dinner together. They've already been doing some of the, the building of whatever it is that's gonna, get the hard drive from the ship. And again, like we were talking about before we started recording, we still have no idea how they're going to do it. They're going to utilize the nanofibers. They're going to utilize these Navy guys somehow. They're building something, creating something, or doing something in the water. And we still have no idea. It's all very hush-hush and sort of hidden. We're not able to see what exactly is going on. And there's a lot of tension. Augie's asking a lot of questions, like how many people are on the ship and yada, yada. And there's, everything's very kind of vague. And there's this great scene where they're having dinner together. And you got the really great quote from that scene there, when Augie really starts to get angry with Raj and wants more information from him.
Yeah, it's like the night before. So
Yeah.
everything's done, like all the work
Mhm.
has been completed, and they're just waiting now for the Judgment Day to show up.
Right.
And so, what did Tom Petty always say? The waiting is the hardest part, right?
It's true.
And,
It's true.
And so, so she, when there's nothing left to do, there's no busy work to distract you. That's when you start contemplating the more philosophical questions about what you're doing.
Implications,
right?
as it were.
Yes, exactly. And what's do I want this to happen? And what kind of a person am I for doing this? And again, as audience, we're like, what's going to happen? Because we don't really know.
Yeah.
And all we know is that Augie is definitely very, like, asking lots of pointed questions. Like you said, like, how many people are on this ship? And is there anyone on this ship that's not a member of the crazy Santee cult? And the answer is yes. There's like going to be a pilot that's the Panama Canal Zone provides to steer the ship through these extremely tight little, canals that these ships go on. I mean, what is there, like 10 feet on either side of the Judgment Day? Maybe.
Right. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so she's like, well, what about that person? Can we like warn them? And, and of course, Raj is like, no. But, and she's getting more and more frustrated because all of the military people, including Wade, are like not showing any empathy at all or sympathy for what's going to happen. And again, we don't even know what's going to happen, but we just know it's going to be bad, right? Because you're like, wow, this is not good, And she says something like, and they're sitting around in this like little like outdoor kind of like pub or something in Panama, like it's like the thatch, palm roof and stuff, and they're both drinking these beers, and she's like, look, I didn't sign up for this, but you understand this stuff better than I do. You're military, so what do you think is happening? And Raj just kind of, without really blinking, he looks at her and he goes, I think we're at war. And, that you get that justification of that's how he's going to be able to sleep at night for what they're going to do is that, no, this is a war. And, this is what happened. So, I thought that was a real cool moment. And again, we're like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen?
Right. I think what's great in that moment, too, is that he's using, like, that's his justification for how he can disconnect and focus on the mission at hand as opposed to what the consequences might be. But I think he's also giving a gift there. He's trying to give to her, like, maybe just thinking we're at war will work for you as well. Like, because you need to disconnect yourself emotionally from this moment if you're going to be able to make it happen.
Survive. Yeah, absolutely. The thing he's like throwing her a lifeline almost, like, here, you're searching for some justification for what we're doing. Here you go. Yeah.
So speaking of what we're about to do, let's talk through what they did. I mean, we've talked through it, before we started recording, and then when we were talking about our overall thoughts on the episode. But I mean, we can safely say that we've never seen anything like this before.
No.
And it is just the precision, no pun, and just it's so interesting, like to never see anything like this before with, just this large amount of like slicing and cutting and, just shredding this ship to pieces. And for it to be a substance that is not able to be seen, that the only thing that you are seeing is the consequences of the nanofibers,
right? As
it passes through, you cannot see them at all, and it just is fascinating and gory and crazy, and you're left sitting there. Like I said, when I watched the scene, I just sat there with my mouth wide open, going, "Oh my God," because I couldn't believe what I had just seen, and I obviously I just put, the whole sequence, and I'd never seen anything like it. And it was amazing and gross and awesome. But I had to include, as the scene, it progresses and progresses and progresses. And then there's like a sort of die down portion of it at the very end when, the ship it has passed completely through. So it is completely sawed in multiple pieces. It's sliced and it starts to run aground on the beach. and then when it hits the beach and then it starts to like, fold, it like fan fold out, like the slices start to come forward, etc. It's just an amazing visual. And then as it's starting to sort of, because it has beached, it's starting to slow down. On the closed captioning, it actually, when it describes sounds, it said metallic sawing dies down. And I thought that was just like such an amazing, like, when will you ever have that as a closed captioning for a show? Like, just incredible. Absolutely incredible. What about you? What stuff did you write down? You've got some good stuff in there.
Oh yeah. Just in my finding anything that's even similar to what we saw, the closest thing that I can recollect at all is back in the original Resident Evil movie.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't know if you ever saw that. It was based on the Resident Evil video game, so it is a zombie movie.
Okay.
And this special forces team, they are breaking into this underground laboratory, which is where this outbreak has happened and so on. And they haven't quite figured out that they're zombies yet, but they're going through and they're disarming the computer defenses that guard all the doors. And they think that they've shut it all down, and they go into this corridor, and then the computer powers back up and it locks the doors on both ends, and it creates this laser beam that starts coming down the corridor and literally cuts one of the guys in half, and everybody else is able to kind of like duck under it or jump over it. And then like the laser starts coming and it starts forming different patterns. Like it moves up and down. And so somebody tries to jump and it cuts them right in half. And finally there's the leaders, the one guy left, and he's like, got in like the combat stance, and he's like, come on, what are you going to do? And the beam starts coming. And then just before it gets to him, it turns into like a checkerboard pattern that is the entire height and width of the corridor. And it literally cuts through him. And there are some other people are on the other side of the door, and they're looking through the window, and they see him standing there. And then you see like the pieces of him slowly slide off each other onto the floor.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. But again, that was like 5 people that get sliced and diced, and you can see the beams, you can see the lasers, you know what I mean? So it's not exactly close, but it's like similar in concept. And like these guys took that and like, put it on steroids, right? And just cranked the crap out of it. But that's the closest I can think of, because like I said, I'd never seen anything like this. And just like you, when I saw it the first time, I like stopped the episode and like rewound it and watched that scene again. Like before I'd even finished watching the episode. Yeah, because I could not believe that they did that.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God, just the indiscriminate death that they, had dealt in that sequence.
Was it before we started recording that I likened it to the Walking Dead thing? Or was that?
Yeah.
It was before we started recording?
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, like I haven't seen the Resident Evil movie, but I would say, like, for me, the only thing that comes close is there's a scene in Walking Dead, and if you know it, you know it. In one of the later seasons, Michonne and Rick, they take down a whole herd they have a big cable that they attach to one car on one side of the highway, and the herd is walking in the center of the highway. And they've got one car on one side of the highway, and then they've got the median, and then they've got the car on the other side, and they both go at the same pace and they cut through. But I was saying to Steve, the difference is kind of like the Resident Evil thing that you were saying. You can see the wire, you know it's coming, you know what it's going to do, and it has like a little bit of resistance, so eventually they have to like stop the cars because they can only go so far, et cetera, et cetera. It's and so it visually has like some similarities, but I just think in this instance that you can't see the nanofiber until you see what it's done. And there's no resistance to it, so it's just going to do what it's going to do. I think it it drew upon some of these things from previous, and it just built on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are these things, if someone maybe did see the Resident Evil or saw something else, and like what's something that would make this more horrifying?
Oh.
And they did that, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, so like things that jumped out at me is that after like the guy with the hose gets cut in half, there's that bit where like the metal exhaust pipes on each side of the boat, like the tops of them start falling off. And you get the sense that the fibers are pulling through them, and like all those little kids are like playing on the outdoor like gym or whatever that's there, and they kind of stop because they are hearing the weird noises and stuff, and then the helicopter literally just like falls into pieces. Right. And then they're all like, oh, time to run, and you get that long shot of Augie's watching on a monitor, and you see like the boat and like all the superstructure on the top of the deck is just getting sliced into pieces. And these people are running, and then some of them are a little slower than others, and suddenly they're getting, sliced into pieces and falling in these big gooey piles. And then I put this scene down that like the show stopping scene for me in this whole episode is when Mike Evans is in his little room trying to get the Lord to talk to him, and he starts hearing like people screaming, even though he's in like the bowels of the ship, right? He's not up near the top. They're screaming that loud he can hear them. So he unlocks the door and he sticks his head out, and this woman who is like a teacher or something in a room down the hallway, she kind of hears it and she comes out too, and she's like, did we schedule a fire drill today? Because he's like, what's going on? And then the scene cuts to it's behind her. So it's looking over her shoulder, and way down at the end of the corridor, we see Mike Evans, and he's, staring at her. And on the wall next to her classroom are all of these like paper chain dolls that one of the kids or one of the teachers made on the wall. And they're like, some are blue, and then there's a whole line that are red, and a whole line are green. And as she's, they're having this conversation of what do you think's going on, the camera like slowly starts pushing in on her, and as it does, the paper dolls right in the middle of each one, it starts falling apart, and they're getting cut in two, and you're just like, oh my god, that's the fiber, run, and then it cuts to Mike Evans, and he literally watches this woman get pureed into a big pile, and then he's like, time to go.
Time to go.
So he bangs on the door, and Felix is in there, and he gets the little hard drive, right, and he goes running, and it's not bad enough that Mike Evans is going to get sliced and diced, but he like tries to jump off of this balcony because he can't go down the stairs because the fibers are already starting to destroy the stairs. So he jumps, and he like obviously breaks one of his ankles. Landing, and I'm just like, oh my god, would that hurt? So then he can't even try and get to the exit at the back of the boat, and so he just looks up and he says like, forgive me, my lord, or something, and then he gets sliced and diced too. And the ending bit for me is when you see the satellite dish get just turned into like 60 evenly spaced strips.
Oh man.
Yeah.
It's so great. I think it's hilarious too how the second time I watched it through, with the Mike Evans scene, I was like, perfect placement of the hard drive right into a spot where the nanofiber did not go through.
See, I thought that too. I'm like, you guys, you might end up destroying the hard drive with the nanofiber, right? What if he didn't go get it? Would it have been at the right height where it had been cut in half? Then what would you have done? Right. So there was certainly risk involved in the plan, but I'm guessing that Wade and Clarence crunched the numbers, and that was like the highest chance of a good outcome, like the best mission with the best chance of them recovering it. But I thought the same thing too. I'm like, what if he had like held it up to his head or something, and you know what I mean? I mean, it's like if he would have moved where he was holding that little red hard drive thing by just a few inches, either way, they would have had nothing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
But
it's funny too. The first time through, I didn't understand why he had jumped.
Mm-hmm.
And because it didn't realize that the nanofibers were already at the point where the stairs were.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't read to me. I must have not been paying as close attention. And then the second time around, I was like, okay, why does he jump? Why couldn't he just go down those stairs really fast? And then when you see it and you're like, oh, I see it, just like he wouldn't have been able to have gotten to the bottom of the stairs in time to have moved quickly away from the impending doom.
Yes.
And so he just took the quickest way out. But I never understand in those moments. I wish people would understand, like, you're a much better choice if you hang and then drop rather than do a full jump over. But in that moment, he's not thinking. He's thinking about, I'm going to die.
Oh, right. Or I'm literally like, I have literally 1-2 seconds to do this.
Yeah, there's no time to like plan what your next move is. You just gotta move, and I get it.
But it did look like it hurt, didn't it?
It did. I was reminded of a few times where I've been watching football and I was like, yeah, I don't want to watch the replay on that scene.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're like, that ankle moved in a way that it shouldn't move.
Yeah, humans' ankles should not bend in that direction. That's for sure. East to west, not good. So, and then you've got the final, the capper on that whole scene. I mean, they do get the hard drive, which is uplifting, but prior to that, prior to them finding it, they're all kind of walking around the wreckage and,
Well, we should point out that the boat, when it finally runs through the fibers, and of course everyone on board is dead, and at this point you're still really not sure like how many fibers have they placed, how low, how high, and the boat then kind of like veers to the right and like runs aground, obviously because all the control systems have been destroyed and everyone steering it is dead, and so on. And when it hits the shore, it literally accordions all the like layers, like a layer cake just comes shooting forward, and then it bursts into flames, and then immediately these helicopters come flying over and drop like the fire retardant stuff on it to put the fires out. So like this is super organized by Wade and Clarence and everything. I mean, they have all these assets ready to go, and then literally it cuts to like it's now dark and they're sifting through the wreckage trying to find this hard drive, and Augie has like worked up the courage to go there and look around, which I'm like, why would you do that? If you're her, you know what I mean? It's like, why? Your psyche is so fragile right now for what you just did. Do not go to the, but she does. And she's walking around and she's looking, and then she just kind of stops and has this like deer in the headlights look. And, they don't reveal what it is right away. And then Raj comes up behind her, I think, and he then sees what she's looking at. And then it finally cuts to it. And it's like a little kid's like foot and leg, like up like halfway through their thigh or their calf maybe. Yeah. And it's wearing like a pink Converse high top. Tennis shoe, and you're just like, oh my god, and it brings up sort of the moral implications here of, were all of these people like bloodthirsty murderers who deserve to die? And what did Wade call them? Traitors to their species or whatever. So he clearly is like, no, they have no right to live. But again, it's like some of them are children, and do they really know what they're doing? And so all of these kind of things that Augie should not be thinking about, now she's thinking about, right?
Of course. And they set up the whole thing like before they even were like deploying the nanofibers. They showed like a couple of interior scenes on the ship. Mm-hmm. And they show these kids like in their classroom having a snack and da da da
Oh
da.
yeah,
And it's like,
yeah.
here's these other kids that are walking down the hallway with their parents and whatever. And you're like, they set up all these like very wholesome looking moments. And then you're like, oh my God, these people are all going to die.
all, and not only that, but in like a really horrific way. I mean, yeah, it's an unbelievable moment. But then immediately, it lets us linger on this foot shot for like a second or two, and then immediately you hear someone go, "We found it!" And then now all attention is on Mike Evans' dead body, and then Wade, finds the hard drive, and now it's like a success. Right.
Yeah.
And what did Wade tell all the Navy guys when they're in that like hangar? He's like, what you're going to do, there's going to be no recognition. You can't tell anyone about it. And it's not going to go on your record, but it'll be like the next 6 days are the most important days of your entire life.
Yeah. We can't tell you anything about it though, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That whole scene is, I mean, it's just, and like the stuff where like the backpacks are getting cut in half, right? All these little kids' backpacks and all of like remember like all like the gauges and the clocks right down the middle, I mean, it's just, that sequence is just unbelievable.
It's funny too, because one of the things I said to Steve before we started recording was about the scene is one of the things that I kept being hopeful for, and this just shows what a bleeding heart, crybaby I am, that I get emotional with everything, and you're just so, well, maybe someone made it. But realistically though, if you watch the way that they're running, there is a large group that was making it they were outrunning the nanofiber. They were making it in a quicker sense. So I was telling Steve that I had this expectation that as the ship made it through like that last portion of the ship through the nanofibers, that let's say there's 1,000 people on the ship, there's 950 people that got sliced, but those people that made it to the end of the ship, they jump. And they make it out of there or jump to the side or something. And you end up with like 2 or 3 people on the side of the beach going, what the F just happened?
Right. Yeah. Assuming that Wade didn't have like snipers ready to shoot them as they came out of the water.
Probably.
Right?
Probably.
But certainly somebody might have jumped off the back. Yeah, that I thought too that maybe somebody on the main deck would be able to run to the back and jump off. But looking at like the ship, the design, is there like a rear deck area? I can't remember, because like the superstructure kind of where the bridge is and stuff, that's all in the back of those kind of boats. So there might have been nowhere to go. I mean, I don't know. Yeah,
it might have just been too late. The interesting thing, and we had a little chuckle about this, was so I watched the episode Saturday, I think, but we were still texting about it a little on Sunday. I just want to say that in terms of absolute ridiculous coincidence, my aunt is on a cruise right now, and I shit you not, she posted on Facebook yesterday, her cruise passed through the Panama Canal yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And she posted the picture that has like here's the 10 feet on either side and da-da-da. And I think she's done the Panama cruise before. I feel like I've seen them from her before. But she posted the picture. She was like, we're making it through Panama. And I wanted to be like, look out for the nanofibers.
That's right. Duck.
It really scared the shit out of her. Or just be like, hey, when you're finished with this cruise, not while you're on the cruise, but when you're finished with this cruise, I've got a great TV show for you.
Great episode for you to watch. It's wonderful.
Just be like, sorry, Aunt Rosemary, but you're never going to want to go through the Panama Canal ever again.
Panama Canal equals getting pureed.
Yeah, I mean, but what are the odds that I'd be watching this show on Saturday and the very next day my Aunt Rosemary posts that picture and she's like, we're going through the Panama Canal. I'm like,
and you're like, son of a...
I know. What are the odds?
Irony is pretty ironic.
Yeah, it is pretty ironic. Thank you so much for pointing it out, Alanis. She did such a good job teaching us about irony. So we, obviously we get the little child's foot, but we did find the hard drive. So the next thing we have is this great scene of like all of these, IT guys, and they've been trying to crack the code and try and get inside. And I love how he's like, it's only been 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh my God, they've been working on it for 2 weeks. And they're just like, yeah, we haven't made it anywhere. And they've got it like locked in. They're all plugged in. They're all just trying to, it's got some kind of security, and they're trying to get through the security so that they can get into the drive and, read the conversations, read whatever information Mike has deemed necessary for them to save. You know what I mean? We have no idea what that is. So it's interesting. I've got like one or two notes, but you've got a really great line there that Clarence has with the IT guy.
Yeah, the IT guy, I couldn't find his name. It just said guy. Which again, this is the thing. Thank you, closed captioning once again. But yes. He's very funny because he's got this very dry, very biting way of responding. It's sort of like a smart ass, but like a polite smart ass. Because Clarence is like talking like, like maybe we should like crack it open and take a look inside. And the guy kind of flashed this look like, no, we're not going to do that, And he's like, but you'll understand what's in there. And he's like, no, we're not going to do that. And so then he's like, well, all right, well, how long is this going to take? And then he kind of goes, don't think, guess. And the guy goes, well, assuming quantum encryption 20 years ahead of ours, medium time would be 3.8 trillion years. and Clarence is like, don't fork about. And so then the guy goes, well, we could strike it lucky. 3.8 billion years.
And what's crazy is in that moment where he's being sassy, but also truthful, that, it's technology way ahead of them. They're doing everything they can and not making any headway at all. And in that like sort of pregnant pause after he says, we could break it lucky and it could be billion years, not a trillion. And in that pregnant pause, all of a sudden it's like, boop, boop. And they're in. Yeah. And they're in. And Clarence, who is just negative enough to, he just has like a very little positivity about his human nature. But he's, he's battle scarred from being a cop as long as he had. And he's got a great line where the guy is like, we're in. And there's a moment and he thinks about it and he's like, we're in because they wanted us in.
Right.
Like, this isn't like some magical, like, oh, I cracked the code. It was like they have something in their system that must be like, after 2 weeks of trying to crack in to the code, they're just eventually going to let you in. But I mean, come to find out, they've been observing the whole time and they probably just like keystroked it in for them.
Oh yeah.
And opened it up. They're just waiting for the right time.
The Sophons are like, when is going to be like the greatest, like most like coincidental, ironic, dramatic moment to do that? Here it is. Do it. Right they're now. Clearly. Yeah.
And I love it. It's perfect. But I like that, Clarence's skepticism, he's like, we're not in because we're smart, because he literally just explained that they're not. Right. They're not going to get in because of their smart. So they're going to have to, use every tool at their disposal for the next like millions of years. And even then maybe not get in. So to have said that out loud and then, Clarence was like, there's no way that we're here because of something we did. They let us in.
Well, it just, think of I think people don't realize like how big a trillion is versus like a billion. And people don't realize how big a billion is compared to like hundreds and thousands. But the difference between a billion and a trillion is massive. And so that's what that guy's saying is like, look, if we get like super lucky and just hit like a random keystroke that does it, it'll still take billions of years for us to get in and do that. That's with us getting lucky, right? That's how far advanced that encryption is. It's yeah. And then, like you said, immediately after he says that line, and it's kind of like, probably thinking, I got a good line, immediately, boom, it opens up, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's great. It's a wonderful moment.
Yeah. And they go through this whole, like, there's a couple of, like, small, like, tiny files, and Clarence puts it into perspective. He's like, would they fit on my iPhone? And they're like, maybe not yours, but yeah, you've got the right idea. They're small enough files. But then the one that's at the very bottom, it's a file extension that they're not familiar with the type of file. And it's like, 100 million, it'd be like the amount of space you could get on 100 million iPhones is basically what they were trying to say. And it's a ridiculous.
I think it was bigger than that, but yeah, it was
or billion, whatever it was. But they were, they're like, it's bigger than your iPhone, that's for sure. So
yeah, that would not fit on your iPhone. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But they're trying to figure out, like, what should we do? And that's when they go to get Jin to try and figure out, like, what's our next step. Time to come to work, Jin. It's your turn.
Yet another person is recruited into Wade's army.
And he does it in exactly the same way he did it with Raj. He just like makes fun of her the whole time.
Oh yeah. He shows up and she's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, most people are really thrilled when the boss shows up to drive him to work. And she's like, "I don't work for you." And he's like, "You don't? All right. Fine, you be the boss." Or she said, "You're not the boss." I mean, he's like, "Fine, you be the boss." And and then he starts asking her about, like, other dimensions. And, and she's like, "Well, humans can't really understand them because we exist in 3 dimensions." And then he kind of looks at her and she's like, "I can understand them as well as we can understand them." As well as they can be understood, So it's a real fun scene. And again, Wade is just having a ball playing that kind of prickish, guy that can do whatever he wants because he's in charge. And so, it was fun.
And he brings her to, the area where they had been working on cracking the code, as it were. And so they do that, but to do it, they use their the game headpieces. And so Jin and Wade enter the game, as it were. And again, another interesting moment. Jin is probably using her headset, and they're probably using, maybe Jack's or whatever.
Maybe, yeah, we don't know.
Maybe. But Wade is not kicked out.
Wade is not. No. Wade meets the sword girl, but she doesn't cut his head off.
Correct. But she does give them a really long description as to what they can expect to happen. And so
a lot of info dump.
It's tough. But in sort of like a, Cliff Notes version, she's basically saying, so they're on their way to Earth. And right now, they have higher technology than the US, than the Earth does. But it's going to take them 400 years to get there. And in that 400 years that they're traveling, they won't gain any knowledge or be able to learn anything new. They're going to probably stay the same. And the Earth will increase its knowledge in the 400 years so much based on how their knowledge has increased in the past, because they go through like how long did it take to go to the revolution, the mechanical age, and and whatever. And so she basically is like, listen, by the time we get here, you will have far surpassed us, and you'll figure out a way to
destroy our fleet, and then you'll travel to our home planet and probably wipe us out there, so we could never threaten you again. Is Correct. What she says. Yeah.
Correct.
And she's probably not wrong, because humans suck.
Yeah, humans, we're the worst. And so basically she's like, so we created this like tiny computer. and we inserted it into your world. And this was that great scientific moment where she was like, we created a computer that's this like gargantuan size, and it's the size of like a cell. And that's when like Jin's like, that's not possible. And she's like, to you it's not possible, for us it is. And what they did was they sent two of these, they're calling them it's the Sophons.
Mm-hmm.
And they sent two of them, and they bound them together so that you couldn't like break them apart like with science. And they sent them to Earth, and then they kept two so that they could kind of like the communication thing that they have with Mike. They would be aware of everything that's happening at that time. Like it'd be sort of like a real time conductor of like what's happening on Earth. And they said that the way that they were going to beat them was they were going to kill your science. And by the way they did that was exactly what we have been hearing about since that first episode. They sent them to all of those particle accelerator labs that are across the world that were all saying that they were getting these weird readings that didn't make any sense, that didn't have any basis in science. And it was confounding all these scientists. And, you know, to the point where they are, you know, leaving their field and doing, etc. And you have to believe that they also were saying that they basically admitted to they were inserting those countdowns in great scientists' heads to get them to stop doing their work, which is what Augie did. She stepped away from her nanofibers, but then she jumped right the hell back into them, didn't she?
She did.
She did. So I'm curious what's going to happen there. But you know, that's why all of these scientists were made to step away. It was not about, you know, at first I was like, is this some kind of God thing? And, you know, because Vera made that comment about believing in God and whatever. And there is such a religious aspect to this show. So I was like, is this going to be some kind of like religious, you know, appearance of God or something? But ultimately, they were using all of these methods to get these scientists to step away from science, because if they can't progress over the next 400 years, then the Santee have a shot of being able to sort of dominate when they arrive in 400 years. And it's the only way that they can do that is to get rid of all of their scientific sort of accomplishments and in future accomplishments too, and tear those down and take them away. And so they make that comment, and they basically, Wade, and there's this great moment where it shows like how the Sophons are, you know, observing all these things. They showed them like inside the accelerators and near like, scientific research facilities and and like just disruptive, like being disruptive. And then it shows them sort of coming into a building and going down a hallway. And the last thing that Wade and Jin see is the view of the back of their heads while they have the headsets on, and they're like, oh my God, and throw off the headsets and they're done. And it's just this amazing moment of, oh my God, this is what's going to happen next. And yeah, we need to be ready. Like, they're already everywhere. You know, they're basically saying like, we're already in your world, observing and making changes and affecting your sort of everyday life. And there's I forget how it gets started, but there's all of a sudden, like, you can see like there's a change in the sky. And
it starts with all the tech, like people's phones start
getting
weird stuff on their screens, and like the television, like Saul's watching like a nature program, and it starts getting fuzzy and out of focus, and
that's right, yeah.
Then it all, basically all of the tech like turns off, and then when it does that, then the sky literally, like this huge cloud like comes over the whole planet, and it almost becomes like a mirror, And so when you look up, you basically see your reflection, although, you don't see you because it's super high up in the sky, but you see like all the buildings that are around you, above you, like you're looking, down on them kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And you see these different skylines from around the world, and, like the London one, and they've got, the Ferris wheel that's there right on the Thames, and you can see it, in the reflection. And then after the reflection is set up throughout the whole planet, then it finally coalesces and you see the big eyeball that is like there looking. So now you get the sense that, not only are we everywhere, we are watching you,
Oh my God, it's so great.
Yeah. And she, the Santi woman, she has this great line that she says right before Wade and Jin take off their helmets. And she goes, "We are everywhere, anywhere, always watching, learning all your secrets, uncovering your lies, and we will teach you how to fear again." And that's when it comes up behind them, and they're like, "Oh my God," and so it is an unbelievable ending, because now you're like, holy crap, what do they do?
Yeah. And there's this great moment too where when the text starts to get all fuzzy and weird and whatever, that the final part is that the fuzz and the interference is what it seems like, then everything goes away and the screen goes black, and every single screen everywhere has the same message at the same time, and it says, "You are bugs."
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And what was so great about it, at least for, idiot Americans like myself that only can read English, is that they showed the message in all these other languages first.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't know what that says. I don't know what that says. I don't know what that says. Oh, I know what that says. And so it really hit home that, it helped with the idea that it's happening everywhere, in that we see like there's like the monk in like Tibet, and he's looking at his phone like, what the hell? And it's got, whatever language he speaks, Chinese or Tibetan or whatever. And it's, it's a bunch of symbols, and he's like, huh? And then it cuts to like another like Asian country, and it has their language. And so you're getting the sense that this message is being beamed everywhere. But again, because I don't speak any of those languages, I don't know what it is. And then finally it cuts to like downtown London, and like the huge video billboards and sides of buildings that just run video all day, they all are displaying "You are bugs." And I think the very last scene is we cut to the cell of where Wen-ji is, and she has this little recorder that he gave her that has some of the conversations Mike Evans had with the Santi on them, he's kind of like rubbing it in and stuff.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The display on the recorder, which clearly is not an internet device by any stretch. It's just an electronic device. It also says "You are bugs."
Yeah.
And it was very powerful. And we did kind of pass over the scene where Wade kind of goes in and gives Wen-ji the bad news about her boyfriend. So
yeah, that's a great scene. And that was the one where you said that in line where, she changes from being, I know, and they will, and definite statements to "I wish" and "I hope." So
and I believe,
and I believe, and then and that's where that line, like, "Be careful what you know," that's where most people's troubles begin. And that's when the very first thing she hears when she presses play on the recorder is like the last, they went backwards, and it's the very last thing that Mike Evans spoke to the Santi about, and it was about the lies. And he's like, "Hello, I'm sorry. Like, are you there?" And just when they're like, "We're afraid of you," and da da da, like, oh God, like he messed it all up.
Yeah, he did. And I think too, she hears the Santi say, "We cannot coexist with a species that lies," or whatever they say. So it's like Wade's intention is to shatter her belief in that the aliens are going to come and save her, or that they're going to save humanity. Hopefully maybe trying to turn her. I don't know, what, maybe just in spite. to kind of like rub it in that like, hey, you know, whatever you thought was going to happen is not what's going to happen, because they're not coming here to coexist with some of us. They're coming to kill all of us, you know, that kind of thing. And I love too when at the very beginning of that scene, he's like has just finished telling her what happened on the boat, and he's like, so my sincere condolences, but you know, he sounded like he was kind of a shit boyfriend anyway, and you know, and just you know, in that kind of smart ass Wade way, right?
Yes. Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like you're just like, dick, you know, when you're listening to him, because it's just you're just like, oh come on, man, but yeah, it wouldn't be Wade
driving the knife in. Oh
yes,
God, yeah.
and twisting it and repeatedly, right? Yeah, so. But yeah, you get that fantastic ending, and like you said, it even cuts to like Saul's watching TV when it starts, and Will is like out on like the balcony of whatever house they're at, and he's looking up at the sky like he said he wanted to do, and he's watching as this massive cloud thing kind of descends over the skyline, and then it suddenly becomes this weird mirror thing, and then finally coalesces into the eyeball that's like literally staring at you, you know. So yeah, it's an unbelievable ending, and I mean, almost like you could almost see this as like a season ending moment, right? Yeah. Where, you know, it's like setting.
Yeah, it would be a really great setup for like, this is your last episode, and then you're gonna have to wait a year to see the rest of it.
For season 2, I know, right? But that's the great thing, is that there's still 3 more episodes of the current season where we get to kind of hopefully dive into this and get some even more answers to what's going on and what they want to do. So yeah, it's
agreed.
Yeah, it was
I think we did a good job. I know. I think we did a good job of getting through all of our notes here. I think I'm looking through mine. I think I got to talk about everything on my list. I think, did we hit everything on yours? Or
yeah, I think so. You know, one thing that I didn't have on my list, but I did want to talk about was early on, they cut to a scene, and it's Augie and Jin, and they're in the safe house.
Yeah.
And they, again, it's a fun little scene where like Jin is literally, she just wants to like, you know, take all these anxiety pills and just eat like her post toasty cereal, and Augie clearly is going stir crazy. She's like pacing around, you know, and then she sees Jin's taking the pills, and she's like, I don't really think that's the best thing you should do. And she's like, they're anxiety pills. I have anxiety, you know, and she's like, yes, but you're not supposed to be taking them like candy. And they start having like a little argument, and then Augie's like, this is why we no longer live together, you know, and they come back to a good place. They're never like seriously angry with each other, but it's like, they're like snippy and stuff. And it was a really kind of a fun little scene between the two of them, you know, kind of, you know, because this is where like post the arrest at the meeting, right? And so they're hiding because they think, you know, she might be a target. And she even says so, because Augie's like, do you really think they're still after us? And she's like, I led the police right to their meeting. Yeah, I think they're still after us, you know. So it was just a fun little scene, and we didn't talk about it, but I wanted to acknowledge it because, again, this episode had so many great, you know, beats where like it did a serious scene and an ominous scene and then a funny scene and then a bloody disgusting scene and then another funny scene, and you know, it was really well edited and put together that it you know, kind of did this roller coaster thing, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah. Oh, such a great episode all around, without question. All right, I think we hit all of our points. We chatted through this. It's probably time for us to, you know, take a little bit of a break. And I think we
need to cut through everything and stop stringing everyone along. Pretty good.
How many more do you have left?
Actually, that's all that I have right now.
That's all you have.
But
okay.
when we go to break, I will come up with a few more, guaranteed.
Oh, great. So. I'm really sorry, everybody. Anyway, but that being said, we are going to take a quick break. We'll come back and discuss listener feedback and what's coming up on the podcast.
So stick around, because we're just a bunch of cut-ups. We'll be right back.
Now there's about 20 of them out there.
What will we do?
Don't worry, we're safe in here. They'll never get in.
Why is it that in every zombie story, people always think that their safe haven is invulnerable?
I know. It's like, hello, the walkers are totally going to get in. You better get ready for it.
No! Diane, get behind me. No, it's not stopping.
Do something, Jack!
And another thing, how come nobody in a zombie story has ever seen a zombie story?
Do you know how much time in human life would be saved if just one person in the group was up on the genre?
What do we do?
Aim for the head.
What?
Aim for the head.
You heard them. Aim for the head.
Quick, Diane, I think we should try and fix the barricades.
I think we should listen to them.
Now, that's the first good idea they've had all episode.
I still don't think they're gonna make it.
Aim for the Head, a horror apocalypse entertainment podcast. Join hosts Diana and Steve as they recap and discuss the best of horror, sci-fi, fantasy, and apocalyptic entertainment. Aim for the Head, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Find us on Instagram and Blue Sky.
Hi, this is Tom Savini, and you're listening to the Aim for the Head podcast with Diana and Steve. And don't forget to always aim for the head, because body shots just don't work.
Hey everybody, we are back. We're going to jump into our listener feedback and then talk a little bit about what's coming up on the podcast, what's going on in the entertainment world at large, et cetera, et cetera. But first off, feedback for this episode. So we got... surprise, feedback from Erica Price for this episode. So Erica was, hey, thanks so much. It's death, taxes, and feedback for Three Body Problem from Erica Price. These are the things you can count on.
That's right. The three definites.
And at least currently. So Erica wrote in via the Facebooks as normal, and she says, Jin looks like she's aged a decade.
Yes.
And I don't think those anxiety pills are going to help at all when it comes to that. So,
but she has anxiety.
I think it works the way she wants it to work. She continues and says, Wenji sure makes a lot of decisions without fully considering their implications. Yeah. And then, oh my God, I forgot that wasn't actually Vera's headset.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, exactly. Remind me. I have a thing about the Vera stuff that I want to talk about when we're done with Erica's thing. It just reminded me of something we didn't talk about. Okay. So Erica continues on and says, so now Augie can resume her work without the countdown restarting since the Santee has severed ties with Evans. They want her to use the tech to do their dirty work. I just had to laugh at Wade's playing Raj and Augie against each other. I don't trust him. Awesome. Keep an eye on her. Yeah, that was good.
Triple checker's work. Double checker work.
He doesn't trust anybody. My black heart is only sad they're killing the cat on this ship.
Yeah, that's true, because Mike did ask Felix, like, does your cat understand why this boat is traveling where it is? You know, try to point out how, like, you know, when Felix is like, I don't understand why they're doing so, and he's like, you know, you're not meant to understand. So that did imply there was a kitty cat on that boat. And
they show it, though. When he's in there watching the video.
Is it in there?
Yeah, they show it sitting there next to him while he's watching the monitors. So
maybe it survived.
Maybe cats have a lot of lives.
They do. Although, you know, it probably got, you know, shredded into at least 9 pieces. So probably not. You know,
a piece for each of his lives.
There you go.
Oh, gross. Sorry, guys. She continues and says, this scene is really cool. They didn't shy away from the gore in the least. The way the ship just slides in layers as it hits the shore was so cool. Agreed.
Absolutely.
She said, well, now they've done it, and there's our mystery lady, which we forgot to talk about, was that final moment when the you know, the reflective, like, supercomputer thing is spreading out over the sky from the Santee, and the eye opens up and is looking at them. You know, obviously we get Saul and Will are looking up at the sky, and we get everybody else, but we also have Tatiana, and they show her from behind, and you see, like, the bandage on her leg from where she was shot, and she's, like, using her crutch, and then she looks up in the sky, and she's just got this look of, like, absolute, like, oh,
bliss.
She's seeing God,
Tears of joy streaming down her face, and has that sort of like open mouth smile, like the
amazing.
Oh yeah,
Amazing.
Almost like a religious moment for her.
Yes, you would think so. Thanks for bringing up Mystery Lady, Erica. I'm so glad because we almost forgot to talk about her. So that's fantastic. So thank you so much for that and for writing in as always.
Yeah.
And just before we jump into our next feedback, the thing I wanted
the Vera thing.
Yeah, the Vera thing I wanted to bring up was I'm curious. So they confirmed, the whole. Vera is, yes, Wang Ji's biological daughter. She wasn't adopted or anything. And also Mike Evans' daughter. And so I'm curious, they also revealed the whole headset thing that it's not hers. So why did Vera kill herself? Mm-hmm. Was she seeing the countdown as well? I don't think so, because she probably would have talked about it because they all had such a close relationship. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, there was a line in this episode where Clarence is like talking about Vera and Mike and whatever, and he never saw her and he was a bad dad, yada yada. In that sequence, he also says the thing about, maybe Mike and Vera were talking. Mm-hmm. Maybe there was some conversation happening, and she's like, "No, the first time he saw her was in that." Yeah, when she was in the casket. But I don't know. I think it'd be interesting if one of the things that's on that recorder is him talking to Vera at some point, or some kind of email between the two. But I'm curious what information was given to Vera that made her question everything and then kill herself. I'm curious what that is, and if there's some element of the, the countdown or whatever. Like, why would Wang Ji recruit her own daughter, when she knows it could have dire circumstances? There's a lot of I have a lot of questions. Yeah.
Why would Wang Ji want the countdown thing to happen to her daughter? Why wouldn't she just let her play the game? And I mean, my take, and this is not spoilery related at all, this is just my opinion on it, is that Vera killed herself because of the death of science. And you remember, she lost her job. They were shutting down the particle accelerator, and it's kind of like, your life's work has been totally invalidated, and now what do you do? And that was too much for her. That's my take on it. Whether or not we're going to learn more about it, we'll just have to wait and see. But that's how I'm looking at it up till this point.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, but you're right. So, it is. It's very interesting. Yeah.
We'll have to we'll see how it pans out. I mean, you know how it pans out. Damn it. Overalls.
I do. Overalls.
But we'll have to see how it goes. But again, before we move on, thanks again, Erica, for your feedback.
Thank you, Erica.
Great perspective as always. So thanks, and we look forward to hearing from you for the next episode.
Absolutely. So moving along, we also got some very, very last minute feedback from our awesome narrator voice, Mr. Joe Griffin.
Oh, thanks, Joe.
And Diana has been, of course, haranguing him on the socials about, hey, we don't have your feedback. What's going on, dude?
At least it's in private, though, so no one else knows except
Joe. Right.
Sorry, Joe.
So anyway, he actually got back to me, and this is what he said. He goes, just say that I said, and I'm going to use air quotes now, it was awesome except for that one bit, and that was fantastic. And then he closes his feedback by telling me I'm supposed to say, air quotes, you're not the boss of me, Diana, end air quotes. So thank you, Mr. Joe Griffin, for your very, very pointed and well thought out feedback.
I have nothing to say. I am rendered speechless, Mr. Griffin. Thank you so much.
No, Joe had texted us earlier, got in touch, and he was planning to do some feedback, but he got stuck in a work project and did not have time to rewatch the episode beforehand and kind of get some thoughts up in his brain. So he hopefully will be back next week with more thorough feedback than what we got here. So hopefully that will happen.
I think that's pretty thorough.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, a great, excellent episode. Diana's not the boss of me. I mean, that says everything that you need.
Hey, that's like pretty much my mantra every week. So yeah.
I love it. Thanks for your brief but very descriptive feedback, Joe. We really appreciate it.
Yes, it's awesome.
Yeah. So coming up on the podcast, just a reminder, we will be off next week while Steve is sunning himself in sunny Florida. So we will return in 2 weeks to talk about episode 6. So I'll put a little reminder on the socials around this time next week to remind people, don't forget to watch the episode or rewatch it if you've seen it before. And you get a little bit more time to get your feedback in, Mr. Griffin. So none of this last minute nonsense, please. Thank you. So in 2 weeks, we'll be discussing episode 6. The title of the episode is The Stars Our Destination. And the synopsis that we have so far is, with the world in a state of panic following a momentous declaration, Wade gathers the world's greatest minds to prepare a defense plan. So perhaps we'll get some answers on who the hell it is that Wade works for, or what agency, or what government agency, or what, I don't know, maybe it's not government, maybe it's some citizen agency. We don't know, but we'll maybe find out a little more next week. Who knows? So that sounds like a very interesting episode. I'm very curious to see how things unfurl after everyone is told that they are bugs.
That's right.
So we got some great news in this past week. They finally decided to let people know, so Last of Us is coming back in April. We should tell you what day that actually is. So
finally, right?
Do that. Finally. So the season 2 is going to premiere on April the 13th, which is a Sunday. And so you will be hearing from us for episode 1 starting right after that. We'll probably podcast depending on when we get the episode. I don't want to say for certain we're going to do Monday if they're doing that thing where they don't release it until the time that it actually airs. When did we run into that with? Something recently, and we were recording on Tuesday instead of on Monday because we wanted to make sure we had time.
It was Daryl Dixon. Because Daryl Dixon it aired on Sundays at 9, and it didn't drop on the AMC site until 9 o'clock on Sundays. So there was no way for us. Yeah. We normally like the episodes would drop like a day or two early at least, and so we could watch it once that way, and then you would watch it again on Sunday night when it was actually aired, whereas I would just watch it again on the app twice, and then we'd be able to do it Mondays. But I think it was Gerald Dixon when that happened. Yeah, so no word yet if I think with Last of Us, I feel like it was released on the app like the beginning of the day or something, so you could have an opportunity to watch it on the app and then when it aired that night. But we'll have to wait and see how that unfolds. So depending on how many times we can watch it, we'll be recording on either Monday or Tuesday. So once we figure that out closer to the date, we will let you guys know. But we are super excited. It is a 7-episode season, and it times out right on Memorial Day weekend if you do the math forward from there. So yay. Nothing quite like, something celebratory, and I'm sure it will be a heart-wrenching episode because that's how they all are. Yeah, it's been fun because
Last of Us, when season 1 premiered, it was during like January and February when it did that, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever that was. And so that's been coming up in my January and February like Facebook memories, and it's all been stuff like, yeah, just when you thought this show couldn't tear your heart out any further, or depress you even more. It's been hilarious to sort of relive experiences through that. So looking forward to jumping down that really deep dark hole again, everybody.
Oh yeah.
That'll be fun.
Nothing like, hanging out in the fun times of Joel and Ellie.
Yeah, because nobody does fun times quite like them. And also, I think I mentioned it last week, but we did get a release date for the start of season 6 for Handmaid's Tale. They're going to drop the first 3 episodes on
January 20th.
January 20th. On April the 8th. And then it'll be weekly until like sometime in the towards the end of May as well. So keep your eye out for Handmaid's Tale as well. So that's Hulu, obviously, and Last of Us is Max or HBO Max or whatever you want to call the damn thing now. Yeah. Lots of really great stuff. I have to put a little 2 cents in if people are interested. It's been running. It started last night on NBC. There's a documentary series that's being narrated by Tom Hanks. It's very like Planet Earth-y, where it's all sort of animal based, and it's all animals and flora and fauna and stuff like that for the Americas, so North America and South America and Central America. And they started last night with an episode on the Atlantic coast, which was very cool because they did some New England stuff, and that's near and dear to me. But there was some cool stuff I didn't even know. So if you want to watch a documentary that is a nature documentary that is narrated by Tom Hanks, who has very pleasing and calming tones, maybe it's exactly the thing you need to sort of calm your soul these days. Can't recommend it enough. It was a delight to watch some of that last night. So check it out if you get a chance. I'm sure it's on the Peacock app. So yeah.
All right. Sounds cool.
Right. Yeah. That's all I got. You got anything to add in there?
No. I think, we're kind of like getting our spring and summer set up for what we're going to do. And it's going to be fun.
Yeah. And in the coming weeks, we'll have there's some conventions coming up soon that we're going to be talking about, too. So once we get those sort of situated days and things that we're going to, we'll start sharing our convention schedule with people, because once we hit spring, it's going to be
that's right,
lots of stuff to do this spring and summer. So yeah, keep your eye out. So
sounds good to me.
All right, so that's going to wrap it up for us, folks. We can't wait to chat with you 2 weeks from now when we'll talk about episode 6. But until then, as always, I'm Diana.
And I'm Steve.
Don't forget to always aim for the head.
Because the body shots, unlike nanofibers, just don't work. To send us an email, write us at aimfortheheadpodcast@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is @AFTHpodcast. Pictures and video are always welcome at our Instagram account, Aim for the Head Podcast, all one word. But the best way to keep in touch with us is to just like our Facebook page to get all of our updates in your feed.
Good job, Joe. Good job.
Way to go, buddy.
Way to go, Joe.